I can't think of a better panel than having Arthur Pearlstein, the Director of Arbitration, on here. Arthur has just been Mr. Arbitrator, I would say, for many years, and is a great resource for us arbitrators and those that are on the FMCS panel. Then we have Beber Helburn, who is a retired arbitrator. Beber has done so much mentoring of new arbitrators. It's just phenomenal what he and Pilar Vale have done over the past few years. I know there are a number of the mentees that participate in all that on this panel. But and Beber of course is a member of the National Academy of Arbitrators and an esteemed arbitrator and mentor. And then finally we have Emily Smith, who's the Executive Director of LERA. And it's just been fantastic to get to know her and Bernadette. They've just been a great resource for our chapter. And I'm just so pleased that Emily's going to share a bit about National LERA. That is another networking opportunity that's not to be missed. So if you would, as we go through this, put your questions in chat. Marita Tate is going to be monitoring those. And I would talk, Marita is just been a kind of the foundational piece of Houston LERA, has done everything officer-wise, and is a retired arbitrator who was in the National Academy of Arbitrators. She's just very accomplished and has been great to work with, and we just appreciate all her help. We will have a question and answer session at the end. Maretta is going to put the course number for the Texas MCLE credits in chat so that you can use that to apply for those credits. And we got approval for 1 hour of credits there. And then we have also posted this program in the SHRM PCD or recertification credit system, so that if you want to get SHRM credits, be sure and put your name, put SHRM, so we'll know to look for that, and then your name and your email address, and we will send you something that will verify your attendance. We're going to record this program, and we'll post the slides and the recording for member access after this. And now I'm going to turn it over to Arthur. So Arthur, it's all yours.
Okay, well, Mickey, thank you very much. It's a real delight to be here among you. I see a lot of faces that I recognize. Right off the bat, I've got to say I'm jealous seeing how many members you have. I'm on the board of the Virginia chapter of LERA, which has only been going for, I think, a little over a year, but I've lost track. But we don't have as many members in the entire Commonwealth as you have for your Houston chapter. So I am jealous. I should mention, unless they yank my travel budget, I will be at the conference, the Southwest NAA conference in Houston, and on next month, I think. And I always look forward to that. It's my favorite live conference to be at. There's nowhere that I feel more welcomed and where I feel just the great sense of the professional camaraderie that exists. So I look forward to that. I also will present at the National NAA conference in Denver in May, and I've also won the prize of getting to go to Detroit to present at the National LERA conference. So I look forward to seeing many of you there. with this many participants, federal law requires that I have a PowerPoint. And so I will do that. But this is always the one part of online presenting that makes me nervous. I don't, it's been a long time since I get nervous talking in front of people. But when it comes time to share the screen, it just seems like so many things can go wrong. So let me try to find what I am looking for. I probably the only foolproof way is to close down everything. Let's see.
Arthur, you're not alone in that concern.
I think I know that's the case.
I know we've all shared documents that
Aha.
we didn't intend.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. So I'm going to be talking about how you join the roster and some common issues that are involved with that, and with and some things I see on the roster. I hope there'll be time for questions either after I present or later, and also feel free to interrupt me. For some reason, it's not advancing. Why won't it advance? Okay. So just an overview of how our arbitration program works. I mean, most of you probably know this, but we have what we call our policies and procedures, and those are embodied in federal regulations, 29, for those of you who are lawyerly or regulatory, it's at 29 CFR part 1404. The roster is, I always like to say, approximately 1,000, but at any given time, there are about 750 to 800 arbitrators who are active. We maintain the biographies and other information about arbitrators. Every arbitrator has an account in our system. When you join the roster, even when you apply for the roster, you'll open up an account. The review, my office takes in the application. Actually, Karen Pierce of our staff coordinates getting the materials and everything, but they are submitted to what we call our Arbitrator Review Board, or ARB, that is independent of my office. It's made up of 5 FMCS mediators and a field manager who review the applications and make their recommendations. We work closely with them, but we don't do the review other than to make sure all the documents are there. I think historically that was to give my office plausible deniability in the event that one is turned down for the roster. But it is a good thing. I think I'd rather not be involved in saying yay or nay. And ultimately, the head of the agency has to approve it, but historically, it always approves the recommendations of the board. The software system that we have, it's now, well, several years old, and it was, like any new software system, when we opened it up, there were some fits and starts, but thankfully, I think we've ironed most things out, and it's, in my view, and from what I hear from many people, it's a very user-friendly system. If you know a little bit, someone's asked me to put it in presentation mode, and sorry, I didn't realize that it wasn't. There we go. I hope that is better viewing, and hopefully it will let me advance the slides. So it's, if you know how to use a computer, there are some arbitrators who have difficulty with it. I've had arbitrators who simply don't use a computer. When they're struggling a great deal, I always ask, is there a 12-year-old anywhere in your life? Because they can do all of it in their sleep, and they come relatively cheap. As they advance in years, then it can become a more expensive proposition. In any case, as you probably know, choosing an arbitrator comes through a party making a request for panels, for a panel from us. The default number is 7. And then the parties use whatever mechanism they've agreed on in the collective bargaining agreement to select from among the panel. And we then appoint the arbitrator that the parties select. There's also the option, if you don't want us to open a case and do any tracking or anything, of simply requesting a list. You can always request a list of arbitrators. There's a separate payment scheme for that, but it's relatively inexpensive, as is access to our roster for parties in general. We last updated the regulations in 2019. I have submitted for review in our counsel's office some updates. So probably within the next few months, they will go to OMB and for notice and comment for OMB review, and then published in the Federal Register for notice and comment. So joining the roster, these are the minimum requirements. First, there's an either or in our policies. Either experience, competence, and acceptability in decision-making roles in labor relations. And by that, we generally mean being an arbitrator, a hearing officer, or even though a labor mediator doesn't bang the gavel and make decisions, if you have extensive experience with that, that can be a substitute. Or if you don't have that kind of background, then substantial and recent experience involving work in collective bargaining agreements. That may be involvement in negotiating collective bargaining agreements and or in administering them, such as being an advocate in the grievance process is a very common route, or being the head of labor relations or a union president, or that kind of thing, someone with some real responsibility in the world of labor relations. And with either of those, you also have to have, or that it has to be determined that you can conduct an orderly hearing, analyze testimony and exhibits, and be able to write up a good award, clear and concise findings, and within reasonable time limits. So as far as the requirement, you have to, there's an award requirement to joining. So there's, again, different routes. The first route is, if you've been arbitrating, done some arbitrations, if you have 5 arbitration awards, if you've done those just in the last few years, you can use those to meet the award requirement. But they have to be issued pursuant to your having been selected by the parties or by a government agency. Has to be a labor relations issue, not employment arbitration, but labor. The decision has to be totally yours and written by you, and it needs to be final and binding. So that's one route. The more common route, because and that used to, a long time ago, it used to be the only route, and it was sort of like, well, how can I ever get to do awards if I can't get on the roster without having done awards? So that long ago created a different set of options, although we've made some changes of that. That involves completing the course offered through the FMCS Institute, and in which I always participate, called Becoming a Labor Arbitrator, or BALA, as it's more commonly known. That course involves 2 lead instructors who are vetted by us and who are members of the National Academy of Arbitrators. In other words, they're highly experienced. And you know, they apply to be on the faculty when there's periodic RFPs, requests for proposals, sent out on that. So complete that, and then with completing that, there's two options. And first, what's more common, 2 years. I lose track of dates. Time is, with COVID, everything flew by, and I can't keep track. Maybe 3 years ago, I spearheaded creation of what we call an apprenticeship program, and I worked with the academy. They want us to have full ownership. They don't want to be responsible for, you know, making recommendations or that kind of thing, but they help us line up mentors or arbitrators to shadow. The ballot grad needs to complete 3 shadow awards, although one of those can be the award that's written up in response to a simulated arbitration that's shown on video at the end of the course. Or if you hurry, if you don't want to do the apprenticeship, and I highly recommend, everybody seems to be having great experiences with it. But if you don't want to do, you can just do 1 award, same requirements as the 5, but only 1. That was our previous director changed it from 2 to 1 over the objections of our entire arbitrator review board and myself. And I am hoping that will be changed back to 2 as the requirement. Having trouble advancing. There we go. Other requirements, well, there's an application that you have to fill out. That's available online at arbitration.fmcs.gov. It requires 5 letters of reference. They don't need to be in great detail or multi-pages, but 2 of them need to be from the union side, 2 from the management side, and 1 that I call a wild card, which can be from either union or management, or from a neutral, an arbitrator or a mediator, as long as is not a current employee of the FMCS. Application, letters of reference, submitting the actual awards that you've done, or if you're doing shadow awards, those awards with the comments that the arbitrators will make about the awards. If you're using BALA to reduce the reward requirements, you need to submit the certificate of completion from BALA, which you'll get and is easy. In terms of your selection, many of you will know that we have certain geographic parameters for panels. You can request it at the metropolitan, sub-regional, or regional level. Usually, in my experience, most CBAs don't mention the geographic parameters, but some do. If they don't mention it, then the requesting party does have the option under our rules. You can request a nationwide panel, but that requires the mutual consent of the parties. So sub-regional is defined as a 250-mile radius of the dispute site, and our radii are as the crow flies. They're not based on a Google Maps route. And Metropolitan provides you a choice of either a 60-mile or 125-mile radius. And here's what the regional map, if you want to make a regional selection, here's what the regional map looks like. Interestingly enough, through some historical accident, the regions do not correspond to the FMCS regions for our mediators, although that's been a moving target. But the arbitration regions haven't changed in probably 20 years at least. There are some optional parameters that parties can put in when they're requesting a panel. These optional ones do require the agreement of both parties. You can ask that everybody on the panel has to be a member of the NAA and or AAA. A lot of people, I mean, sometimes I wonder, well, why are people using AAA? Sometimes they say, well, I like the AAA arbitrators. Well, if you like the AAA arbitrators, almost all of them are on the FMCS roster, and you can specify that. You can specify that all the panel members be attorneys. You can specify that all the panel members need to be ready, willing, and able to conduct a virtual arbitration. And by the same token, you can specify that they all need to be ready to do an in-person arbitration. We established those last two with the onset of COVID. And then can also say, specify certain specializations in issues and in industries that correspond to the boxes that the arbitrators have checked off. Can also request only arbitrators who have agreed to do expedited arbitration. And if the parties want, they can ask for certain customized special requirements. In some cases, that will always require some manual work by the staff. And if it's highly specialized, sometimes I'll need to get involved with doing various keyword searches among arbitrator biographies. Fees, these are our current fees. They will probably be going up in the next few months. But right now, for arbitrators to join the roster and to be on the roster for the first 5 years, it's $150 for your first address. And you can pay for additional addresses, $50. Maximum total is 4 additional addresses. I'm told by the technology people that above 4, the programming becomes so complicated because it's kind of a geometric progression of some sort that it would be that would cost us a boatload to make that available. For those who have been 5 or more years on the roster, it's a little more, $250 for the first address and $100 for each additional one. For customers to request a panel, it's $35 if it's online and $70 if it's manual and or there's a requirement for the use of physical mail. Those will be going up. I don't think it's been finalized, but those will go up a little bit in the next few months, no doubt. And then, of course, there are fees between customers and arbitrators and our customers, meaning parties. That's between the parties and the arbitrator, but failure to pay is something we take very seriously. And if a party doesn't pay or refuses to pay, let us know, and we do get involved and kind of break bad on them and threaten, and we sometimes have to carry through, but usually it shakes it loose. Say, hey, the parties won't have access to our roster anymore if the fee is not paid. Just to show you some trends to give you. Betty asks a question, and I hope I didn't mislead. She is correct. The total is 4 addresses, not the 1 plus 4. Just to be clear on that, cannot have more than a total of 4 addresses. So you can see the trend over the years, over the past 10 years. Obviously there's a little bit of a decline in panel requests. It hasn't been, so dramatic in the last few years. The numbers that actually get all the way to award is small compared to the number of panel requests. But this does not include cases where arbitrators still get paid, because most arbitrators charge a cancellation fee, and many parties can't decide to settle it until they're, a couple of weeks before the arbitration, and the arbitrator can set their own cancellation period as long as it's in their biography. So many times arbitrators will get paid for doing almost nothing. And so that's not reflected in this chart. Here we go again. There we go. And just to go over quickly the responsibilities of the arbitrator. Timeliness. Once you're appointed, you got to get in touch with the parties within 14 days. Once the case has been heard and the record has closed, the award must be issued within 60 days. Close of the record if there are post-hearing briefs. Close of the record is after all the briefs are submitted. And then there's a report that has to be submitted online that used to be on just a paper form called the R19, which just reports on certain things like total charges and number of hearing days, etc. Arbitrators' fees need to be consistent with what's on the bio. Parties need to pay what they expect to pay. Obviously the arbitrators have to abide by our regs, and our regs also incorporate by reference the Code of Professional Responsibility for Arbitrators of Labor Management Disputes, to which FMCS is a signatory, along with the National Academy of Arbitrators and AAA. So what we do, we administer the roster. In some cases, I'll have to get in and review the collective bargaining agreement about the process of the selection process if there's an argument. We appoint the arbitrators. We try to fix problems and deal with complaints. Complaints from the parties about arbitrators. Sometimes there'll be complaints or inquiries from arbitrators about the parties. We do everything we can to assure compliance with our regulations and the code, up to and including discipline of arbitrators by suspension or removal from the roster if need be. And we do a lot of education and outreach to customers or parties and to arbitrators. I spend a lot of my time in that. What we don't do, we don't determine the arbitrability of a case. We do not publish. Actually, we don't even collect, much less publish awards. We often get inquiries from parties saying, hey, can you send me a copy of the award? No, we can't, because we don't have it. We have no power to overturn any part of an award. We can't appoint arbitrators other than per the agreement of the parties, or in accordance with our regulations. And we have there's no penalty that we can assess against arbitrators other than with respect to participation on our roster. We can't fine them, and we can't make you stand in the corner. Some violations that we see: untimeliness, non-responsiveness. The parties try to get in touch with you, or we try to get in touch with you, and there's no response. Arbitrators having ex-party contacts, which means contact with a party without the other party present or copied on the email. Violations of the Code of Professional Responsibility. We handle complaints about violations, and we enforce the rules. Just a few additional considerations. The timing of the hearing and the cooperation and scheduling. More and more, I see this more in the federal government than anywhere. There's sometimes parties who are recalcitrant in scheduling an arbitration. And most arbitrators are very reluctant to schedule an arbitration at a time when both parties say they can't be available. But there comes a time when you have to bang the gavel, and if one party just isn't being cooperative, say, hey, I've got no availability for the next year and a half. Well, it's up to the arbitrator, but I personally would not stand for it. The most frequent complaints that we get about arbitrators: late awards, late getting in touch with the parties, or late responding to the parties, difficulty in scheduling or allowing those big delays, failure to disclose a potential conflict of interest, always err on the side of disclosing. Overcharging, particularly study and preparation time, is a frequent complaint we get. Sometimes I get a complaint about lack of clarity in the award. There's not much we can do about it, but there will be sometimes when I will review an award to see if maybe the arbitrator should think of pursuing a different career path. And then we've had a number of issues in the COVID era in terms of disputes over in-person versus virtual hearings. And that is the subject of a presentation that I could spend a couple of hours with. And then finally, these are some contacts at the Office of Arbitration and Responsibilities. And I think you'll all be getting a copy or access to a copy of the slides. So that information is on the slides for you. And that is the end. I hope I didn't rattle on for too long, but I appreciate your listening. I didn't see too many people drop off, but then I wasn't paying close. Not all of you are on camera, so maybe some of you have gone to sleep, but it's time to wake up, because there's more and better to come from a couple of people much better than me. So thanks very much for having me, and a real pleasure. And I'll stick around throughout for any questions.
Beber, you're up next.
Okay. I want to start with a couple of thanks and a tribute. Thanks to Mickey for having me on this panel, and double thanks to Mickey for the cooperation that Houston LERA has had with the Southwest Rockies part of the National Academy. Also, thanks to Arthur. We've tried very hard within our region to keep tabs on new FMCS arbitrators, and Arthur has been extremely helpful in providing that information and extremely helpful in guidance for those who generally have had the ballot course and are applying for the FMCS roster. I also want to take a minute in tribute to my dear friend Diane Massey of blessed memory. We lost Diane all too soon when she lost her battle with cancer last year. But Diane, in many respects, is the role model for those of us in the Academy who are interested in encouraging new arbitrators and mentoring new arbitrators. She spent a lot of time and effort doing that with both males and females. And certainly there are a lot of women in the region, both now members of the Academy and those that are working toward accumulating the necessary cases to apply for Academy membership. Diane followed her father into the academy and was the first woman academy member in the Southwest and now Southwest Rockies region. Let me turn to mentor characteristics, which is one of the topics that Mickey asked that I talk about. And I will talk about three. One is you don't want to get a mentor who doesn't have the commitment to doing the work and certainly the experience, including academy membership. And there are arbitrators that simply are uncomfortable doing the mentoring. Your mentor ought to provide useful information and advice. And that includes alerts to Zoom meetings that sometimes the academy puts on, but Zoom meetings that may not come to the attention of those that are much newer to the profession. You want somebody who is an academy member, particularly to act as a sponsor and for FMCS applications, but also for the opportunities to attend arbitration hearings among various clients for familiarity with the process and for familiarity with those people who are probably selecting arbitrators. Second characteristic is to get somebody who is actively arbitrating. I guess that qualifies coming from me as an admission against interest. It is particularly important because it's the active arbitrators that will give you the opportunities to observe hearings, to collect the files that are necessary for you to write shadow awards if FMCS's application is an issue. And there may be a variety of different kind of hearings. Railroad hearings are very much different than general private sector hearings. There are hearings with a single arbitrator. There are hearings with a panel of arbitrators. And I think the third characteristic that I would stress in a mentor is that mentor's ability to teach. Don't expect your mentor to write your awards or even tell you what the award ought to be. My own practice is to ask a lot of questions that are designed to make sure that the arbitrator of record, my mentee, has touched all the bases and considered all of the areas that I think ought to be considered given what I've been told. And I ought to add here, don't feel bad about calling a mentor and asking him or her to listen to what you have to say about the case that's on your desk at the time. I retired just this past September when I completed the awards for a railroad docket of 9 cases. There were 2 of those cases that were particularly troublesome to me, and I reached out and talked to some folks who I had confidence in. And what happens in many cases is that the process of getting your thoughts together to present a case to a mentor or simply somebody who you have confidence in and want to talk to clarifies a lot of issues for yourself. The other is, I hope your mentor has patience with what seems to be mundane. what is simply one more Billy Bob was absent too many times case for us may be troubling to a new arbitrator. Finding a mentor. The best way is to go to places where there are likely to be mentors. Obviously, our conference that comes up the end of February, local gatherings, the Houston LERA, probably the best example in that area. If folks are getting together periodically for lunches in your area, try to attend the lunches. Reach out to gatherings where you can get to know folks that have spent some years doing what you want to do. I've mentioned the Southwest Rockies annual conference. Let me suggest for those of you who are planning on attending, will need a hotel reservation and haven't done that yet, you ought to do it as quickly as you can. The hotel originally gave us a block of 40 rooms. They added 10 more to the block. And last week at some point, that block sold out and they've added another 20 rooms, given what I know about registration. And seemingly folks really anxious after a 2-year hiatus to be part of that conference. I won't be surprised if this final block of 20 also sells out. And that's going to give you a better rack rate than you would get otherwise. So attend if you can that conference and whatever conferences come up that are relevant. Establish relationships with experienced, active arbitrators. If there's a regional outreach coordinator, reach out to that person for help. I've been doing that for the region informally. We don't have a formal position, though I hope we will agree in Houston the end of next month to make the position formal. But one of the things I've been doing is hooking up folks who have had the BALA course with mentors in the region so that they can accumulate observation opportunities and files necessary to write the shadow awards. And I'm sure Mickey will talk a bit more about that. When we meet in February, Thursday is devoted to arbitrator training and advocate training. Myself, Pilar Vale, and past National Academy President Margie Brogan will handle the arbitrator training, and most of the day will be devoted to discussing a series of hypotheticals. I think you will find it both entertaining and informative, and I think it will be a useful activity. Let me end with a challenge to the advocates that are on the call today, and particularly the advocates who have the opportunity to strike arbitration panels. Academy members who are interested in outreach will find the emerging arbitrators sometimes because Arthur has helped us do that, and sometimes simply because folks come to our attention. The National Academy of Arbitrators has spent a lot of time and energy in the last 2 years developing a plan to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the profession and the organization. I don't think it's a deep, dark secret that the arbitration community and thus the National Academy of Arbitrators has been populated for the most part by senior white male arbitrators. We have spent a lot of time and energy on that. The original panel designed to develop a what I'll call the diversity plan involved myself, two other members of this region, and we had more members on the panel than you would expect if membership was spread out equitably. And I think that was because folks in the academy understand that we work at this consistently and have been effective at it. And currently, the Academy has a committee to implement the plan that was formed. We can do a lot to try to attract and mentor arbitrators of color, women arbitrators that have been underpopulated in the profession. But we can only do so much. And so the challenge is to those of you who strike panels to take a chance on names that are not necessarily familiar to you. Because the end product that we all hope for are both more diversity and diversity that is successful as labor arbitrators. That's what I have to say. I believe Mickey will follow me, and I look forward both to hearing from Mickey and Emily and for the questions that follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Beber. And that was an excellent overview of mentoring and the diversity efforts that are involved there. That's just a critical part of this arbitration process. And Arthur, thank you for a great overview of what the FMCS does for the arbitration process. My part of the program is to give you just a brief snapshot of the process that I went through to become a labor arbitrator on the FMCS panel. Your journey's going to be different from mine, but hopefully there's something in here that might give you some help. And if you're wanting to get started as an arbitrator, at least this is one path to get there, and it kind of follows a standard path, I think. I'm going to go through this quickly so we can have some time for questions. Let me share my presentation. These are some of the things that I'll be covering, and I won't spend time reviewing that. From a background standpoint, I have a degree in chemical engineering, and I'm a non-attorney, so that's kind of probably a strange background for being a labor arbitrator. But my love of labor relations really developed as a supervisor at a chemical plant where I had to interact with the union leaders, and I found that I really enjoyed that interaction. So later in my career, I spent about 10 years in labor relations, did some negotiating of restructure plans, but spent 7 years as a company bargainer with an international union at our plant. And then I was involved with the labor relations with LERA as a management director for a few years. And after retirement, I spent about 5 years working as a consultant for my company on a labor relations case. So that's kind of the background that I had. I would say it's harder for a non-attorney to get on the panel. So the first thing that I did after my part-time work with my company ended was to take a look at what I might do to get into mediations or arbitrations. Although arbitrations was my first interest, I did become re-engaged with LERA. I was out for a while and became the treasurer. So that was a networking opportunity. And I got a Texas certificate authorizing me to do mediations from U of H. I did a very limited amount of pro bono work with the Better Business Bureau as a mediator, and have on my credit 2 house renovation mediations that I settled. As far as the FMCS roster goes, Arthur talked about it, but it was really a catch-22 with the 5 arbitration awards. How can you get those if you are not on a roster and you have no experience? And even worse is being a non-attorney. So in 2018, I took the BALA course, and I really just took it for training and just fun rather than thinking that I would ever get on the panel. But at that time, Arthur laid out the plan to do these shadow awards, which was later implemented in mid-2019. So thank you, Arthur. I never would have gotten on the panel without your work in that area. I will have to say that Moretta and Beber were very helpful to me, have been over the years, and in identifying a mentor and counseling me. And Paul Chapdelaine agreed to be my mentor. And what a fantastic arbitrator and great friend he's become. It's just been really fantastic. I just can't thank Paul enough for how easy it has made my experience grow in working with in the labor arbitration field. And I certainly could have done it without his help. So thank you, Paul. I think Paul's in the audience, so you can raise your hand and say hello.
You're welcome, and you were a great student.
And then just from a timing standpoint, this is how it happened for me. I attended the Labor BALA in November 2018. I started working with Paul at the beginning of 2019, and then the shadow award procedure came in place in mid-2019. After that, I completed 3 shadow awards, and in the second half of 2019, submitted my application December 5th, 2019, and then was appointed to the roster in January of 2020. So what's that, about 15 months after taking the BALA course. And it could have been quicker had the procedure been in effect. I won't spend much on this because Arthur covered it, but I tried to put in my biography as many things as I could that would make me available for hearings. Even during the COVID process, I was available for in-person hearings. Actually got picked for a couple of panels for in-person video hearings. I did take the federal sector arbitration training case from FMCS, and that is a prerequisite for being able to do federal sector cases, although I haven't done any of those. And there are just various things that you can put in. Additional addresses will get your expand your area of potential arbitration cases. just to give you an idea of what it's been like for me, I formed a Texas LLC, Arbitration Mediation LLC, in 2019. Over the 3 years, I've been selected for 8 cases. I've done 4 awards, 2 settled with no fees, 1 with fees, and then I have 1 case that's underway. I've also been able to get on a couple of panels in postal. I'm on the APWU and the NPMHU panels. I haven't really gotten much work in the way, and these are expedited panels, so they're not the regular arbitration panels. I do have a 2-day hearing scheduled, and I've had 3. I've been scheduled for a number for APWU, but 4 of them have been canceled. That's just kind of part of the process. Now, I recently got on the Houston, Texas police panel, and I've done 1 award there. 1 was settled with a fee, and then there are 2 hearings that are scheduled. So that looks promising as a source of cases. Just a couple of critical factors. I just can't emphasize how important mentoring is, and getting that before you get on the panel. The next big thing is networking. You have to be able to get your name out there, and being in a labor or ADR organization like LERA, both the local and national, is really important. Conferences are particularly important. As an example, at the Southwest Rockies Conference in February, they have sessions that are put on by the postal people as well as police. And those are sessions you can attend and get your name brought up. You can know who the contacts are, and they can give you the process of how you can get on those panels. And finally, I think making acquaintances with, especially new arbitrators, is a great way to get acquainted with what's going on, looking for group training opportunities. Beber and Pilar put on just a fantastic set of training for new arbitrators that was really helpful to all of us. The NAA, and there's some formal training that just look for anything that you can take that will add to your experience and education training level. FMCS puts on excellent training courses. The ballot course is one that's highly recommended. The NAA, National Academy of Arbitrators, does training that is available to new arbitrators that are not on the panel. So, and it's all excellent. And then getting on the other panels is a way to get some experience in your training. And just a couple of final thoughts. It's really a weighty responsibility to be a labor arbitrator, especially when you're dealing with a termination case and a person's livelihood and their family are at stake. So it's, I think all arbitrators take a lot of time, particularly in termination cases, but in all of those, to make the best decision you can make. You're never going to satisfy everyone. One party is going to be happy and the other may challenge you in court. But as a general rule, it's not a good idea to try to satisfy both sides in your award. Sometimes that may be the right thing to do, but mostly it's not. And just remember, you're only one decision away from no longer being selected for cases, but that shouldn't drive you to try and achieve a balance. Well, this one was a company one, so I'm going to go with the union on this one. All you can do is just look at the facts and write it as you see it. And remember that you're not alone. There are a lot of arbitrators. There are a lot of mentors. that are great sounding boards, and just don't be embarrassed to ask for help. That's what I wanted to say. I did want to add one other thing is I meant to mention in my in the chapter meeting to welcome Micah Vaughn, who is our in the president-elect role. Micah couldn't be here today. Robert DeLeon is a new labor director, and Michelle Perino Taylor is our first associate director. So it's nice to welcome them on the board and look forward to working with them. And I hope that some others that are on this call might have an interest in working with our board. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily Smith. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much, Mickey. Actually, all of these presentations have been, wow, tremendously helpful. And I see exactly why Houston LERA has done so well. This is valuable, insightful information to have. Mickey, I particularly enjoyed the timeline that you shared because that's always kind of a murky process to understand. So with that, I would like to share my screen. Hopefully that went okay. Okay, so Mickey has asked me here today in my capacity as the Executive Director for the Labor and Employment Relations Association to add a few words to all the insight that you've already heard. Many of you know me through LERA, but I've also done plenty of things before LERA. So I've been with LERA for 16 years, but before that, I did communications and PR for all 3 major campuses of the University of Illinois system. Before that, I did investments with Morgan Stanley, and I built a clientele there, just like many arbitrators are building clientele. And prior to that, I worked my way through college, working for a man named Augustine Oberwari, who super colorful character all by himself, Mr. O to those who loved him. He was and still is to this day probably the most entrepreneurial individual I've ever known. He would have an idea, and the next thing you knew, we were purchasing a property, we were walking in, taking inventory, writing up a business plan, securing our funding and loans, executing all the pieces until we had profitability, managing all his other businesses. I was young and hungry, and he didn't care that I was still in school, so that was great. And he gave me a really thorough grounding and understanding of business management. And of course, you know, I've worked at LERA now for 16 years, and I support professionals in all aspects of the employment relationship, labor, management, neutrals. So today I'm going to share some thoughts from all of those experiences, and particularly how you can use LERA's big tent to your advantage. So before I get into the how to use LERA to your advantage, there are 3 rules that I would like to share for new arbitrators to internalize in the building phase of your business. And then we can move on to the practical tips of how to use LERA's platform. So rule number 1, know your brand, because you are here because you probably have a lot of specialized knowledge in a particular issue or industry or capacity. Most people do not come to arbitration because they don't know anything, that's for sure. You need to understand what that is that you're bringing, what knowledge you already have, spend some time considering what that is and developing your personal brand, and practice your elevator speech. Every interaction is an opportunity. So once you understand your brand, the rule number 2 is to know your clients. All of that is going to work hand in hand with knowing your own knowledge areas, of course. So spend some time considering who your potential clients are, what do they do, where can you find them, what industries employ them, what organizations do they belong to, where do they hang out, where do they congregate, how do they prefer to do business, what kind of legislation governs them, how can you deepen your expertise in all aspects of that. And rule number 3 is to think like a business owner. You need to market yourself, learn all the ins and outs of running a small business. If you have any gaps, like in marketing or social media or accounting, to start some sort of learning process to figure those out, and lean heavily on the people who already know. As you heard from Beber and Mickey and Arthur, you know, mentoring is just huge. So the 3 rules of arbitrators: know your brand, know your clients, think like a business owner. And if you take those 3 rules and add them to the 5 pro tips that I'm about to share with you, I think you can move from newly minted arbitrator to respected expert. So to do that, that's a wide gap to bridge. And Mickey has already shared with you some ways to do that, as well as Beber. And I certainly agree with everything they said. But they know it's a tricky process. I don't think that's news to anyone here. But if you position yourself correctly, then people will begin to know that you have the right experience and you can speak the language. So I put together 5 pro tips that you can use to bridge this gap, and I'll share them with you. The first pro tip is easy, it's cheap, it's available to everyone. It's be present online. You need a website, you need a LinkedIn profile, you need to have your information available in the membership directory at LERA at the chapter and the national level. Make sure you thoughtfully complete your member profile in the directory so people can find you and learn about you. If you're building an arbitration practice and I Google your name and arbitrator, I sincerely hope that I'm going to find your LinkedIn profile at a minimum. And I hope it has a photo that's recent in this decade. And I hope it has something about what you do. And I hope that, that you would be talking about some of the things that you're expert in. And by talking, I mean posting. However, if I said LinkedIn and you said linked, what? So don't worry. There's tons of great resources out there that can get you up to speed. And I would add one last tip here is to check out the profiles of all the other arbitrators that are out there. Beginning arbitrators, experienced arbitrators, what is your competition doing? What are they offering? Get to know that. So we'll call this pro tip 1A. Even though it is easy and cheap, there are some things to know about being present online. So get to know what social media guidelines you should be adhering to. For instance, we want to see you posting occasionally. Let people know that you're out there, but we don't want to see a posting from you every hour. Be thoughtful about the content that you create or forward. And one rule of thumb is if you're going to forward content, you'd better vet it. But to save yourself time, you may consider only forwarding content from like known outlets like the New York Times or the Washington Post or Time Magazine, something like that. And don't forget about the LERA Dialogue listserv, because that is a listserv that connects pretty much all of the influencers in the entire field. So post there occasionally, once a month, twice a month. Again, don't get crazy. So we're on to pro tip number 2, which Mickey has already discussed, network and engage. So as an arbitrator starting out, you're going to want to attend all the events that you can where your potential clients and influencers will be to get your name out of there. And Mickey has already given you a really good listing of all those events that are available to you. As you can see here, our next LERA meeting is in June in Detroit. We have, but what you may not see on the website is that we have a number of informal events planned throughout that 5-day event. It's really the day before and then June 1st or 4th. There are also like 85 sessions on the program. So it's a huge conference in terms of content, but we have all these informal opportunities to network. And those are where you're really going to get the bang for your buck. And we're talking about baseball games, tours. We also just found out that the Grand Prix will be in town, the Detroit Grand Prix. That's where they shut down the streets of Detroit. This is the first time they've done it in a long, long time. And they will be racing through the downtown streets of Detroit. So I expect that the city will be lively and hopping, and there will be tons of people, things to do and see that weekend. The program is live currently on our website. Registration opens in February. And I'm going to ask you, Bernadette, do you have anything to share about the special events that will be taking place since you organize those?
I could add a little, sure. So we are still in the planning phase for the extra events for June, but there are about 10 ideas that we're exploring, and several labor history tours, Detroit Museum of Art, where the Diego Rivera murals live, hopefully a fun off-site reception. We know right now that we have planned a factory tour of the GM motor plant. That's always, when we can get those arranged, it's always a big draw. And we plan to attend the Tigers baseball game. They are going to be in town on the pre-conference day. I always have a ton of fun organizing these events, and I hope that they add a level of fun, excitement, and of course, that opportunity to network at the conference. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Bernadette. So on to practical pro tip number 3, position yourself as a speaker. So once you determine where your clients are, where are they regionally? There's probably a local LERA chapter there. So find out what LERA chapters need speakers. You can go to lerachapter.org and see a list of all the LERA chapters. We have arbitrators that make the circuit, if you will, at various LERA chapters. And you just have to contact each chapter and find out what their needs are and what their process is. But that is really an excellent platform. Once you've done the show at the local level, then you're ready to take your information to the national stage. LERA National can help you do that. Our annual meeting happens each June, as we already talked about. The next one that you would be eligible to speak at would be the 2024 meeting in New York, which Mickey already shared is going to be a joint program between LERA and the International LERA and the FMCS. It's going to be amazing. I am so looking forward to that. How do you speak at a national meeting? That is a subject that I could probably speak for an entire 30 minutes on, but let's boil it down to the best way to get on the program is to organize your own session proposal and make sure that you are listed as one of the speakers or the panelists in your session. You need to submit it by November 15th, and that deadline is the same every single year to participate in the meeting the following June. However, if you are not ready to do your own session proposal, there are ways to segue into this. You can, for instance, chair a session, and that's where you introduce people in the session and have other kinds of roles other than being your own speaker. So there are plenty of opportunities for that for the Detroit meeting in 2023 this June. And pro tip number 4 is to get published. So LERA has a number of publications that, I mean, if one of your potential clients is reading an article that you published that you are an expert in, there's really very few better ways to become the expert. So Bernadette Tiemann is our production manager for the Perspectives on Work magazine. So Bernadette, can you share more with us about that?
Sure. So as Emily mentioned, LERA has several opportunities, some more formal and some a little less formal, to help you get your name out there as a published author. The simplest, of course, if you write a column or an article that's going to be published in a news outlet anywhere from your local paper to the New York Times, let us know about that. Send us the URL and we will run it in our bi-monthly LERA e-bulletin. That's an electronic publication that many of you probably already receive. We have a LERA Perspectives on Work. This is a magazine that we publish annually. My personal favorite of all of our publications. It is geared more towards practitioners and written in a newspaper style, so it's very easy to read. I like to think that it's one that's read cover to cover by many, many people. It is fully designed, printed, and mailed to all LERA members, subscribing libraries, and it even makes its way into classrooms around the world. Then lastly, we have other research-driven publications that are much more formal. They can be found online, but we're not going to get into those too much today. If you're interested in becoming a published author, and LERA could be a fantastic outlet for you, reach out to us and we'll help you get there. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. And I will slide through this last one because it's already been hit. Volunteer, 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 become a chapter officer at a LERA chapter, join a committee at national. There are so many opportunities available. That is, I won't go into all of it, but join something. I'm sure there are many opportunities available for you that would put you in close quarters with the clients that are your potential target audience. So that brings me to the end of my pro tips, and you can find a complete list of national opportunities and deadlines at the LERA deadlines page, which I have listed here for you on this slide. And just keep in mind, this is just the beginning. LERA will be with you throughout the entire arc of your career. So we have different ways to support you at all levels. So thank you so much for letting me share, and I'll turn it back to Mickey.
Thank you, Emily, for doing that. Moretta, Arthur is going to have to leave. So were there any questions in chat for him? I have 2 questions I wanted to ask him. One is, can you be an advocate once you're on the FMCS roster?
Well, the answer to that one is easy. No. Not unless you got on the FMCS roster before 1986 and were, this is probably an expression I'm not supposed to use anymore, but grandfathered in.
Okay. And another one is, how many cases can you expect to get when you start out as an arbitrator?
It's wildly variable. In terms of financial planning, I would count on 0. But hopefully you'll get more. It does take a while to build a practice. Typically, some people are able to get up and running faster than others, and I don't have a magic formula, but I think that Emily gave some great tips for how to get, how to sort of juice that up.
Okay, and one thing I would say about that is, and it's just a personal feeling, I don't know whether you would agree with it, but I think if you're starting out as a labor arbitrator, you need to have a source of income that can support you for a number of years until you become more known in the field. If you don't do that, you just really can't depend on, because if you think about it, you're at the mercy of the companies and the unions to select you out of a group of 750 arbitrators. And another question, what I'm thinking about.
Let me just add, if you don't have another source of income and decide that labor arbitration is going to be your sole source, I would move to a state that has the best welfare benefits.
Let's see. Moretta, were there any other questions for Arthur?
I don't think so. I think most of them got answered. And Arthur, you mentioned the Code of Professional Responsibility. I assume that's on FMCS website.
It is on the FMCS website under our arbitration page, and also, of course, it's on the National Academy website at NAARB.org.
It's something I would.
And our website is FMCS.gov.
Well, and along with the code that's on the Academy website are also the advisory opinions of essentially the Academy Ethics Committee, and that provides good guidance as well. Maybe the one that's of most interest is the most recent guidance, which is to arbitrators, which is, what do you do if you're in the midst of a squabble between one party who wants a virtual hearing and the other party that wants an in-person hearing? What is the latitude that the arbitrator has?
Yeah, I'm moderating a panel on that at the National LERA conference in Detroit on that very question with 2 terrific arbitrators.
Yeah, go
Arthur,
take a look at the code. It's very readable and it's important.
Yeah. Arthur, I think it's probably, how accurate is a statement that there's a large portion of the cases go to the more experienced arbitrators?
It's unfortunately very accurate. I've written an article on the market for arbitration, and the nature of that market is it goes by different names, but the most common name in economics for the market is it's a superstar market, where a small percentage of the arbitrators have a very large percentage of the work. But many of those arbitrators, are retiring slowly but surely. So there will be some opportunities. The answer to Chris's question about a number of times appearing on a selection list, is you can contact me or a member of the staff, and we can provide you that information. Just tell us what time period you want to look at.
Okay. Well, Arthur, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, and we appreciate it.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and thanks very much for the honor of having me and appearing with such a great group and being with you. And I look forward to seeing many of you in Houston next month.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
How about questions for Beber? I have a couple.
Yeah, I didn't see any in the chat. They might have gone to him directly.
Can I apply to management and Beber, can I apply to management and union to be on the permanent panels?
I'll preface my answer with the obvious, and that is I am old school. Historically, the Postal Service and its unions are the only set of parties that I am aware of that actually encourage arbitrators to apply. My gut tells me, Mickey, that applying to other sets of parties where that is not the rule is likely to be off-putting. But it's been, realistically, it's been a long, long time since I was in a position of needing to apply. I spent 30 years on the faculty at the University of Texas, so I had a day job when I was trying to build up an arbitration practice. And when I retired after 30 years, it was because at that point I was confident that I could run a full-time arbitration practice, and was on several postal panels. So there was no need, and I've never investigated it. So I have less than complete confidence in my answer, but certainly folks ought to be applying to the Postal Service panels, because for a new arbitrator, that's like getting on those panels, particularly if it's a regular panel rather than an expedited panel. It's like dying and going to heaven. As you well know, there are far more expedited assignments that evaporate before the hearing than expedited cases that go to hearing. Okay.
Yeah. I applied to the APWU where a mentor comes in to really can help you is recommending you when they hear from a person associated with the Postal Service or the police that they have an opening and anyone that can help. And so Paul helped me get on the National Mail Handlers panel, and then Moretta helped me get on the police panel. So, I mean, your mentors is so important in all aspects of this.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, much to my amazement, I got an email from the Postal Service offering me 3 Postal Service APWU panels. It was an easy decision. I was 4 months past retirement, and didn't want to travel. But when I thanked them, I also made 2 recommendations. They opened that door for me. It turned out after the fact, I found out that one woman whom I'm mentoring, actually in California, got an offer to be on APW expedited panel. We'll see about the other one. I'm hopeful it will be helpful.
Okay, and one other question. What about books on arbitration, Beber, that you might recommend people get?
Oh, Lord, there's always El Curry and El Curry. And I don't think that I would spend the hundreds of dollars, frankly, on the latest edition. I'd go to Amazon or whatever and see if I could find an earlier edition. But that is something that I think ought to be on every arbitrator's shelf. There's one caution, frankly, that I would issue with it, and that is of all of the probably thousands of cases that they refer to in that book, they never tell you whether the cases are in there because the authors think they're particularly insightful and well written, or whether they're in there because they're examples of things that shouldn't be done. But that certainly is a book that you ought to have. Another one that I would certainly recommend is the second edition of the book that was edited by Ted St. Antoine. And I'm blanking on the title, and Moretta, maybe you could help me.
Yeah.
Is it Common Law of the?
Common Law. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. There are some older books that were authored in part by Tony Sinacrapi, one on evidence. There are three of them, Sinacrapi and Marvin Hill. Those are good books.
Well, we have overstayed our welcome on this. I apologize for going over, but we had such good experts here that I wanted to avail of them. And so thank you everyone for your help that are presentations, and we look forward to the conference in February, and for the presentation, the program that we're going to put together for April to May. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for your participation.